Look at him. The miller would rather freeze with his stones than keep warm at home.
Michael didn't look up. His dog stayed close as sack after sack went onto the cart.
Save your breath, Caleb. That man's been hard as his millstones since he was a boy.
But the laughter spread, sharp as the wind cutting across the square, and no one stopped it. Then, the first snow began to fall, and the crowd broke apart, hunching into their coats. Inside the mill, the great water wheel turned, its groans steady against the ice. Michael pulled the heavy door shut. The sound of the village vanished into the snowfall. The wheel kept turning, its rhythm the only voice in the darkening room. A single flake melted on the frosted glass. The mill's deep cold was not still. Outside, winter sharpened. Inside, Michael lit the lamp. The wheel never stopped. The mill's great stones had been silent since autumn. Now Michael fed them grain for the first time in months.
Easy, old friend. The stones will warm us before long.
He moved through the room, stuffing rags and old mud into every crack the wind could find.
A room doesn't freeze all at once. It leaks to death.
Outside, the village cabins grew dark, frost thickening on every log. Not a single chimney breathed smoke, but in the mill, the turning stones threw off a slow, steady heat that the sealed walls refused to give up.
That's the way of it. The water moves, the stones turn, and the cold doesn't settle.
By the fifth night, Michael read an old book while the dogs slept across his feet.
The wheel doesn't care what the town thinks. It just turns.
The mill hummed through the darkness, a pocket of steady life in a valley that had stopped moving. Week by week, the cold sank deeper into the valley, and the village tightened its belt.
That fool's bones are probably rattling with the frost by now. Should have sold his stones for firewood.
But fewer men laughed. The talk in the market had grown thin, like the flour sacks that weren't being refilled. At the mill, Michael broke the morning ice with a long pole. The water still surged beneath.
Keep moving. That's all water has to do.
The mill race never fully froze because the river's movement kept the deepest water alive. Then one afternoon, the sky over the mountain pass changed. Dark clouds piled high. The wind carried a weight the valley hadn't felt all season. The first heavy snow was gathering. Inside the mill, Michael lowered the lamp and listened. The stone's rhythm was steady.
The wheel doesn't listen to the sky. It just turns.
By nightfall, the wind had teeth, and the cold no longer sank, it lunged.
That's no ordinary storm. That's the sky closing its fist.
In the village below, Thomas moved from door to door, checking that every latch was drawn tight.
Double the barricades. Whatever's coming down that pass won't knock through wind alone.
Inside the houses, hand querns were pulled from cupboards, their small stones grinding painfully slow.
This is all the flour I can make in an hour? The dough won't rise in this cold.
Then the first true wave struck, a wall of white that erased the road, the fence posts, the far side of the street. Michael forced the mill door open just enough to see, the dog refusing to step out.
The race is still free as long as the water moves. The stones don't care what's outside.
And miles up the hill, the mill's wheel never stopped turning. On the third morning, the village was a tomb. The snow had climbed past every windowsill. Alara turned the hand quern until her shoulders burned, but the flour came out coarse and slow.
This will never feed the whole street. The stones are too small, the cold too deep.
In the tavern, Thomas gathered the elders. Not a single man smiled.
The grain we have won't last. Hand querns grind too slow. Children are already crying from hunger.
Outside, the blizzard screamed on, and the cold inside the cabins dropped to the bone. Families burned furniture. Some burned old clothes. The cold was not the real terror. It was the quiet gnawing in their bellies.
If we can't grind faster, we'll starve with grain still in the sacks.
But no one looked up the hill. No one remembered the mill. And 3 miles away, the great stones turned on, grinding flour no one came to claim.
The mill still stands. Michael might be alive in there. His stones could grind faster than 100 hand querns.
You'd never reach it. Visibility is gone, and the drifts are taller than a man's head. It's a death walk.
If I don't try, we all starve anyway. At least this way, there's a chance.
Before anyone could stop her, Ilara pulled the door open and shoved herself into the white. The wind slammed into her, driving ice into her cheeks. The village vanished in seconds. She followed the buried road by memory, each step sinking past her knees. The cold sucked the air from her lungs.
Keep moving. If you stop, the drift will bury you standing.
A sudden gust threw her into a deep drift. For a long moment, she couldn't move.
There, above the white, a faint glow. The mill wasn't dead.
She clawed herself upright and pushed forward. But the storm had not yet surrendered. She fell against the mill door, her fist barely making a sound. But Michael heard it. He threw the door wide and pulled her inside. Her coat had frozen solid in the wind.
Michael, the town is starving. The hand querns can't grind fast enough in this cold.
Her words struck like the cold outside, hard and unrelenting. Michael's jaw tightened.
But your mill, it's still running. You have flour. You've been grinding all this time.
He didn't answer. He just turned and looked at the stones, the stacked sacks, the warm amber glow he had kept alive alone. The dog whined softly, sensing the weight in the air. Flour dust drifted past the lantern.
They laughed at me, and now they're dying without what I have.
A long pause hung between them, filled only by the steady groan of the mill. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the wheel turned, and Michael's silence was the only answer.
Go back. Tell them to come. I'll grind for every soul.
The journey is a death trap. They'll never make it.
Then I'll send flour with you. But they must come. The mill can't carry grain to them.
He packed a sack and thrust it into her arms. The look in his eyes left no room for argument. Ilara struggled back through the drifts, the sack a heavy hope. At the village, her words fell on desperate ears. Within the hour, lanterns were lit. The first shapes appeared out of the white, a ragged line of bent figures following the glow of the mill. One by one, they stumbled inside. No one spoke. The warmth of the stones met them like a quiet judgment.
Get near the stones. Dog'll move. There's bread and porridge soon as the flour's ready.
The mill, once a lonely cell of one man, now hummed with the breath of a village. For 3 days, Michael barely slept. The grinding stones turned without pause, flour piling up in the warmth.
I can keep going. The water never stops, so neither can I.
His hands cracked open, blood mixed with the flour dust on the lever.
How did I not see it? The mill isn't a tomb. It's the only heart left beating in this valley.
Ilara baked the first real bread in a week, tearing off chunks for the youngest.
The storm hasn't eased. The grain will run out if I can't keep the stones whole.
The dog never left his side, pressing against his leg each time the mill groaned under the strain.
Steady, boy. The water's still moving. We're not done yet.
Beneath the lower stone, a hairline crack had begun to spread. Unseen but growing, the wheel turned on, carrying the weight of a valley that had no other choice. On the 5th morning, Thomas leaned close to the lower stone. A crack, fine as a hair, spidered across the quartz.
Michael, there's a crack in the lower stone. It wasn't there yesterday.
Michael knelt, tracing the fissure with a flour-whitened finger. His face went hard.
The crack runs deeper than it shows. If the stone shatters, there's no second mill.
If that crack splits, we lose the mill.
We lose the mill, we lose the valley. I know. Hand me that oak wedge.
Michael grabbed the wedge and drove it between the frame and the stone, easing the pressure on the crack.
We'll grind slower, but the stone will hold. It has to.
I'll keep my eye on it. If it widens, we shut down.
Outside, the storm hammered on. Inside, The wheel turned, the crack a hairline between survival and silence. On the 6th day, Elara came forward, her face hollow. The village coffers are empty. No more grain to grind.
The last sack was emptied an hour ago. After that, there is nothing left.
The room went silent. Even the wheel's groan seemed to soften.
I have grain of my own, stored in the loft. It was meant to see me through the season.
Your own stores. You'd give your own winter grain?
Michael didn't answer. He simply climbed the ladder and began hauling the sacks down himself.
A man doesn't hold grain while children starve, not even for those who laughed. These go into the hopper. No rationing. Grind it all.
Caleb lowered his head, ashamed beyond words. Outside, the blizzard tore at the walls. Inside, the miller's own grain flowed through the cracked stone, and no one spoke of tomorrow. That night, Caleb pushed through the huddled families and stopped before Michael. He couldn't lift his eyes.
I led the mockery. I called you a fool. It was fear. Fear of needing what I didn't understand. I am sorry, Michael. Sorry for every word. We don't deserve what you are giving.
Michael didn't speak. He just looked at the man who had laughed the loudest and nodded once. Then he picked up a fresh sack of grain and placed it in Caleb's trembling arms.
Carry it. The stone doesn't ask who's sorry. It just needs to be fed.
Around them, other heads dropped. The shame in the mill was heavier than the cold outside, but the wheel never stopped. The crack in the stone held steady, and the flour kept coming.
I won't forget this. I'll carry this debt.
The storm howled on, but inside the mill, a different wind had died. On the 10th morning, the wind simply stopped. A strange, heavy silence pressed against the frosted glass.
It stopped. The air feels different, thin, like the sky is holding its breath.
Michael pushed open the frozen door and stepped out into a world reborn in blinding white. The sun broke through, low and golden, striking the mill like a benediction. The wheel still turned. The villagers crept out behind him, shielding their eyes from a light they had not seen in days.
The sky. It's clear, Michael. Look, the clouds are gone.
The stone held, but the crack is deeper now. I can feel it in the grind.
He knelt and traced the fissure again. It had widened, a dark line through the quartz.
It won't last another week, but it lasted through the storm. That's enough.
The valley was alive. The mill had carried them through, but Michael felt the cost in his bones. By noon, the first figures came not with empty sacks, but with bundles of firewood on their backs.
Michael, we've come to set things right. Every family owes you a debt.
They stacked split logs by the mill door. Someone brought a cured ham, another a thick wool coat.
I'll help mend that stone. I am no miller, but my hands are strong. I am not leaving until it's done.
Michael looked at him, the man who had mocked loudest, now standing with a stone chisel in his fist.
Good. The stone doesn't care who holds the chisel.
Elara brought a loaf of fresh bread, still steaming. She placed it in Michael's weathered hands.
Your flour, Michael. The first true bread in weeks. It's only right you break it.
For the first time in days, Michael's face eased, not a smile of victory, but of quiet, weary release. Outside, the sun melted the frost from the mill's stones, and the water wheel turned in the light. That evening, Michael stood alone on the mill race, the dogs settling at his feet. The water purled beneath the ice.
The mill never needed their respect. It only needed the water to keep moving.
Inside the mill, the wheel groaned softly, a sound as familiar to him as his own heartbeat.
They called me a fool, but the mill never laughed. Not once.
The memory of their voices faded. What remained was the steady rhythm of the stones.
All those years, I wasn't hiding. I was listening to the only thing that never lied.
The wheel turned as it always had. Not slower now, not triumphant, simply true.
They needed a mill. I needed a purpose. The storm just made us honest.
He went back inside. The mill was warm. The dog followed, settling in its usual spot. The miller had never asked for vindication. The turning stone was answer enough. Weeks later, the first thaw crept down from the peaks. The mill race ran full and loud.
This is for the next planting. The valley wants you to have first claim on the harvest.
Michael took the sack, his hands still rough from winter. He said nothing, just nodded. Inside, the repaired stone turned smoothly. Caleb tightened the new oak wedge while Thomas checked the alignment. Outside, children chased each other through the slushy snow, their laughter carrying across the race.
The mill would outlast the winter, as it always had. But now, there were hands willing to keep it turning.
Michael stood on the race with his dog, watching the water run free. The valley was waking.
There's a gathering tonight. The whole valley is eager to thank you properly.
I'll be there, but I'll sleep at the mill. The stones don't like to be alone.
The water wheel turned on, and behind it, the mill had become something it never was before. A home that was not alone. As the seasons turned, the story of that winter became the first thing parents told their children. They spoke of the miller who stayed, of the stones that never stopped, and of the warmth that outlasted the blizzard. They never mocked the mill again. Spring melted into summer, and the wheel ran clear, its rhythm steady as the river's pulse. Michael's dog lay in the tall grass by the race, dozing in the sun. Inside, the new stone turned where the old one had cracked, the wedge still hanging on the wall. Michael would stand at the water's edge, listening, needing nothing else. The mill had always been warm. It just took the cold for the valley to understand. And in the long evenings, when the wheel caught the golden light, no one called the miller a fool. He was the heart of a valley that had learned to listen. One evening in high summer, the valley gathered at the mill, not out of need, but out of gratitude. The stones that had ground against a blizzard now turned for a feast.
This bread is yours, Michael. Every loaf from here on carries the warmth of this mill.
I used to call this place a frozen tomb. Now I'd call it the warmest hearth in the valley.
We thought you were stubborn. We didn't understand that the mill was keeping you warm all along.
The mill doesn't judge. It just turns. That's enough for me.
Children ate bread, still warm from the oven, their faces lit by more than candlelight. The same windows that had been sealed against the blizzard now stood open, letting the evening breeze carry the smell of baking into the valley.
They laughed then. Now they come for bread. The winter was worth it.
And as the wheel turned in the twilight, a miller who had been mocked became the heart of a valley that had learned what warmth truly was. As the last embers of the feast died down, the villagers made their way home along the path carved through the snow that winter.
They came to thank a frozen miller. They found a warm one.
The wheel's rhythm had become a lullaby the valley no longer feared to hear. Children would grow up knowing that place not as a relic, but as the warm heart that beat through the valley's darkest winter.
They'll never mock the stones again. They'll bring their grain and their children.
In winters yet to come, a family caught short on bread would simply point to the mill and say, "Go see Michael." The cracked stone was never discarded. It leaned against the wall, a silent teacher of what pressure can break and what it can build. And Michael, alone as he preferred, never ate a meal without remembering the blizzard that had turned an outcast into a valley's only hope. The mill had always been warm. It had just taken the cold for the valley to understand. And so the miller stayed, not out of stubbornness, but because the turning stones had become the surest heartbeat of a valley that had learned to listen. The morning after the feast, the mill woke early. The wheel never slept, and neither did the baker's fire.
It's no longer my mill, it's theirs. And that makes it warmer than any hearth.
A steady stream of villagers came and went, their sacks heavy with grain, their faces no longer carrying shame.
Pour it slow. Let the stone find its bite. The mill won't be hurried.
The warmth that had once been his secret now wrapped around every person who crossed the threshold.
I've been baking all night. The whole valley smells like your flour. Michael.
The blizzard tried to bury us. Instead, it planted something that would never freeze again.
No one ever again called that mill a frozen place. It was the fire of the valley, and its keeper was a quiet legend. The wheel that had turned through the blizzard turned on, now a melody that the valley would never forget. And Michael, the miller whom they had mocked, stood at the water's edge, listening to the only music he ever needed. The valley slept safe that night, wrapped in a warmth that had nearly been lost.
The stones will still be turning long after I am gone. That's the way it should be.
The water wheel never hurried, never rested. It had become the valley's clock and its promise. Michael listened to the familiar groan, the same sound that had kept him company through the blizzard.
I never needed their laughter. I never needed their thanks. But the wheel, it always needed me to listen.
Generations would grow up with that sound, never knowing a winter without the mill's steady heartbeat. And when the cold returned, as it always did, the families would simply point to the mill and say, "The miller is there. We will be warm." Michael's story spread beyond the valley, a quiet legend of a man who trusted the river and the stones. The mill never sought glory. It simply turned, and in turning, saved them all. And the miller, with his dog and his stones, was content to let the water do the talking. The mill never asked for a story. It simply turned, and in turning, wove one that outlasted the cold. Michael latched the door, the familiar warmth settling around him like an old coat. The lamp flickered once, then caught, filling the room with the same amber glow that had held back the blizzard.
The world outside will freeze again, but the stone will be here, ready.
Outside, the water wheel carved its patient circle, marking time the way it always had. The valley slept beneath a blanket of stars, the mill a steady light on the hill.
All that noise from before, it's gone. Just the water now.
The river would never stop, and neither would the mill, because they had both learned the same lesson: keep moving, and the cold never wins. And so the mill turned on, a quiet monument to a stubborn man who found warmth in the turning of stones. And somewhere in the quiet, a miller and his dog listened to the water, and the water listened back.